Ambition is the first word that comes to mind with anything related to Xeno. And nothing really exemplifies that better than Pied Piper, a lost media JRPG. Thankfully, we do have footage of it, and that's how pretty much anybody engages with it today, and hopefully a fan remake of the game is soon to release. Pied Piper is also a prequel to the Xenosaga trilogy, all on a little phone in 2004. Much like with older Xeno titles, explaining it is a process in of itself. Mobile games in the 2000s is something not that unheard of back in the day. Persona 3 and even the 25th Ward had one, though obviously this is something that was absolutely missed on Western audiences. This was done not for promotion, mind you, but due to how this was a story worth telling in the Xenosaga project, but its platform was also chosen due to the fact that this whole story was not able to fit into the PlayStation 2 title Xenosaga 2. And since this was so early in the millennia, the game obviously has a SNES graphical style due to those limitations for the time on phones back then. I know, we have Genshin today, praise Cosmos? Watching it is nostalgic really, like the graphics are reminding me of early Pokemon titles. This was essentially the compromise that was forced on Takahashi and his lovely wife Saga Soria, who worked on games on that very SNES console. And it is important to know her name with this title since all we have is just her writing here to engage with, which for the Xeno series and Xenosaga was her last direct role as screenwriter for. So you can still see her work in Xenosaga 2 very clearly. When asked about what her last contribution to the series was, she replied with writing an original script for episode 2 and rewrites of the script for Pied Piper, which she noted was free of charge, and she hasn't heard from the team since October 2002. She then saw a promotional video by courtesy of another department in February 2004, and in April 2004 she learned what the adapted game was like, and of course that's when the interview was done in that year. Her involvement clearly showing signs of a rather unfortunate circumstance with Bandai and Monolith Soft. If you aren't in the know, after the original release of Xenosaga, the script she and her husband made for 2 was reworked to address criticism of the title, and had both parties step down from direct management, and Pied Piper clearly shows that that is a shame, as the title stands out as surprisingly impressive. Ms. Saga has created a tragedy in a game with a plot focusing on serial murders taking place in a universal online and physical network called the UMN. The main character, Juan, the human before he turned into a cyborg in the mainline games, is a part of a police force tasked with stopping the murderer. This expands into being a JRPG that fully earns its sci-fi genre description, much like Xenosaga itself. It has a distinctive Ghost in the Shell vibe following different victims and sci-fi elements with a police force, though it quickly goes naturally into lane territory. Since a large part of this title is taking place online, along with all of us following along with it, you only can watch it on like a YouTube video. The opening scene is an antagonist watching over a child connected in an online network. Talk about relevant. Think about VR chat or other online interconnections that we have. Much like Lane, DSX, or other media in the Heisei era of Japan, it's both nostalgic and aggressively relevant. You are dealing with characters that are wanting to fill and address their loneliness, stop political assassinations, assess the soul within an online network, the humanity of machines, and essentially androids in the form of realians. It's only hitting harder in our world. And an interesting character offers a big dose of nostalgia within Bugs. A playable character that is incredibly retro, unlike anything in Xenosaga. It simply wouldn't fit in the mainline series since something like Bugs is so outdated in the main series, but still something incredibly far off from our own times. Bugs' design is reminiscent of the Jetsons and other sci-fi material of the mid-20th century. It's super charming to watch him interact with his operator too. The retro feel is absolutely apparent too, the love interest and party member Melissa being women to the stoic and emotionally repressed John, whose cold demeanor and attitude has him being compared to a robot. You'd think a game centuries beyond our own world wouldn't go into this stereotypical representation of gender, but it does. It's not a flaw, but rather a function of these Xeno titles. Xenogears released in 1998, Xenosaga 1 in 2002, while Pied Piper released in 2004. These games are over 20 years old now. Xeno has always felt more inclined to explore and use sci-fi concepts than something that was intended to push envelopes, unless you're Billy, of course. But as you can already see, Pied Piper is filled to the brim with concepts and tight character dynamics. It has that energy of exceeding through its limitations, much like Final Fantasy VI. Again, worth noting, Saga did work on writing for Sabin and Edgar in that title. I guess she has a knack for blonde guys, but yes, each character in Pied Piper has a logical and fulfilling endpoint, almost always having a dynamic that's meaningful and explores, expands, or connects to concepts and story elements in the main games. You might hear people praise Xenosaga 3 or 1 to high heaven, but this lost media title is absolutely impressive. Another comparison to a JRPG series worth bringing up is SMT. Its sheer oppressive atmosphere is palpable while the characters are trying to survive in dangerous, non-corporeal environments. Starting intro dungeon has characters die off in a world that's quickly removing the threat of death in the daily life of humans in this universe. The far future offering life-extending procedures will never erase death, though, in this world. While the game doesn't have much in the way of OST, the story that informs the game creates an intense feeling throughout. Trying to find clues to the murderer only to fail at each step as the danger increases, the environments being dark, unpredictable, and having victims to save that more than often than not become carcasses to ID. Or of course, having shocking truths to uncover about their world. Death is all over this game, which all of it makes sense as it is a tragedy, the moments of peace being highlighted by the romance between the main character and his love interest Sharon, as mentioned before. It's within this game that we get the context and full scene of arguably the last happy memory that the main character has, which was shown only hazily in Xenosaga 1. And we all know that it's spiraling to their deaths if one has played the very first Xenosaga game, or if one can pick up on the introduction of the game itself in Pied Piper. Traversing hostile environments with random encounters and a highly conceptual story is the bread and butter of SMT. So it's always nice to see it here and in Trails in the Sky 3rd chapter. Pied Piper is essentially Fate Zero or a JJK Zero. Simply put, a tragedy entering into online worlds of the dying and the dead. In a very literal sense, this is raw. In Xenosaga 1, you dive into the minds and subconsciousness of characters throughout the game. So what happens in Pied Piper is you have an important witness die to the case, but you watch the investigation team go into the mind of their fresh corpse. Yes, you do interrogate their shadow. Yes, this is better than Persona 4. The body only has 45 minutes before decay sets in. Good luck on the investigation. And dungeon, of course. In a meta-textual sense, this is raw too, because we will never fully get the picture of this title. Unfortunately, we cannot truly engage with this title on its own terms. It's trapped on outdated hardware, like moments in time lost within aging gray matter. We only have remnants of this experience. Why do we look back like this? Well, it's because Xenosaga is constantly asking the player to dig further into its mysteries and ambition. It has the self-confidence to be a multi-part series without a conclusive ending till the developers were practically forced into it. Xenogears, Saga, and Pied Piper, much like the original folktale, is dragging us along to their uncertainty, their twists, their turns, and like Evangelion, their deadlines. And that's the joy with Xenogears and Saga, truthfully. Of course, for this title, Pied Piper is brisk and fast-paced, which some might find the sheer speed as an issue, but that's only natural considering the format of the title. We do not have the space or time for a Kojima-esque cutscene right now. Pied Piper is arguably the closest the series has gotten to truly touching its original ambitious conception of a multi-part series of games, though. Since it is able to function without the main characters of Xenosaga, since the future cyborg of Saga isn't a main character, and one could have technically played this as their first game, it essentially stands alone in the Xenosaga series. When compared to Gears or Saga, both are struggling under the immense amount of story and concepts being presented here. These games are requiring players to learn about Christianity and Nietzsche, at least Nier focused on one of those. And on the other hand, Xenoblade is successful and a competently put together and incredibly accessible JRPG, which absolutely can't be said about Gears or Saga. Xenogears is giving you Evangelion-inspired Wikipedia summaries of plot points with new themes and concepts being directly inserted into the game. Xenosaga goes halfway between a visual novel, but mostly PowerPoint to reveal one of the most important plot points of Xenosaga involving Shion. Pied Piper is an actual game, at least, unlike how Gears and Saga kinda devolved into at times. It's interesting to me how this title works since it's a full and complete RPG. Complete and comprehensive is something that is incomparable to Saga and Gears, which is really wild to think about, but it's more than likely going to happen when one is self-aware of what they can and can't truly create. It's not a shock to anyone that the Blade titles aren't as dense as the original console titles. Unless you're Xenoblade 3, of course. Imagine if Missing Year was given this treatment, and then we'd actually be closer to the original number of games Takahashi planned for Saga to go to. Pied Piper is truly another fascinating piece of the Saga experience. Both it and the DS remakes are games that enhance the original games and had important parts to play for their series. Juan, or Ziggy, in Pied Piper is looking back into a past he can't truly let go of, and looking at how Xenosaga was a first Monolith title, I doubt anyone in the team can either. Which, well, they clearly haven't. For the fans, I find that this title encapsulates the era and history for the wider Xeno series. 2004 was a pretty unprecedented time for JRPGs, and especially for Xeno. Its graphical style, its status as a prequel, its tone and atmosphere, its lost media status, its place in time, it's almost like this was always meant to happen. As a self-aware statement in of itself and the series as a whole. It's a ghost in the network, the past clearly connecting us to the present. We watch children die, dangerous political figures rise to power, a family system break apart, characters desperately trying to find truth in memories destined to fade away, a man ending his own life, and we follow him try to run away from his loss, but the memory never leaves him after becoming repurposed. Full stop, we're talking about 20-year-old, almost 30-year-old JRPGs that have been left to time, or rather left in Japan. Trying to do research or read interviews of the time regarding these games feels like trying to grasp memories long past. The development history, especially with Saga and the hardships that Saga went through at the time, also feels relevant. Pied Piper to me genuinely captures the spirit that feels central to the Xenosaga series and era. Ambition can be easily applied to the characters, especially with the concept of will to power. The main character is attempting to integrate himself into a family system that lost her father and fails to do so. The antagonist, Voyager, fails to have complete control or agency over his murder spree. Xenosaga and Gears never became a 6-part series. Pied Piper is a game about going far and testing your limits and falling short in the process of one's life. Despite its ending, it's still something we can find meaning in within its triumphs. That's why we're here today talking about a game lost to time. I don't know if it will ever get remade or remastered much like Ziggy himself did, but I believe for anyone looking at the original titles that there's something important here in looking back. Thank you for watching, and I'll be on my way to getting into Xenosaga 3 for now.